Guys, just a quick little update from me before I get started. In less than 24 hours' time, I'm jetting off on a massive holiday around the world. Going to be gone for just over a month here. So what that means for the channel is this will be the last episode for the time being from this location. Obviously, while I'm traveling, I won't be taking my microphone. I won't obviously be on my desktop, which I am now. I'll have my little laptop to continue writing, and I'll try and get some small, shorter episodes out once the Warriors obviously make these free agency moves that we've been waiting upon. Obviously, I'd hope that the Jonathan Kuminga situation would have been resolved by now and that the Warriors would have also made their signings of Al Horford, DeAnthony Melton, and whatever else. But unfortunately, that's not been the case. Again, you can continue reading my work over at bluemanhoop.com, and I will try and make a couple episodes now and again, obviously, once we get a resolution on the Kuminga situation and other free agency signings as well. But thank you very much for the support, particularly over the past month or so as free agency has got underway. It's been a frustrating period for Warrior fans. I know I feel all of that, but thank you very much for the support, and we've reached over 2,000 subscribers. So I'll have a couple of episodes, hopefully, from different countries around the world in the next month or so, but I'll be back September 5. I'll land back home, so you can believe that I'll be getting back down to it, getting ready for training camp, obviously, and then the start of the season the following month. Thanks again, guys. On this episode, I'll be jumping into more of the Jonathan Kuminga situation, and specifically in regard to the Sacramento Kings, and having a look at some of these financial details, which makes a Kuminga trade to the Kings very difficult. Guys, welcome back to the Golden State with Mates podcast. I wanted to jump back into the potential Kings Warriors kind of sign and trade scenarios here involving Jonathan Kuminga, because Sacramento have re-emerged, I suppose, as the leading suitor for Kuminga, potentially along with the Phoenix Suns as well. But we had the report from Slater a couple of days ago now on ESPN radio in Sacramento, I think, talking about the fact that the Kings and general manager Scott Perry and head coach Doug Christie had been in contact with JK, trying to pitch to him. And obviously he was open-minded to potentially joining the Kings this offseason. So I thought I'd just jump back into these potential sign and trade scenarios with the Kings, because there's been a lot of debate and a lot of angst, I think, between Warrior and King fans on social media, particularly going back maybe a few weeks ago now when the Kings' interest really started to drum up, and now even more so in the last couple of days as well, given they are once again potentially the leading suitor here for Jonathan Kuminga as his free agency situation continues to drag on here nearly into August. The issue for me with the Sacramento situation is that, and I've been in debates with Kings fans on social media, and it's a bit frustrating, but I suppose we're all entitled to our opinions. Obviously, I value JK at a higher level than what Kings fans probably do, and they don't understand the leverage necessarily that the Warriors have in this situation as a restricted free agent. But I also probably don't value their players as much as what they would do as well. So this is just what happens, right? It's just the reality of fan bases probably overvaluing their own players, and I think I'm certainly part of that, and I'm sure you guys are to a degree as well. And there's plenty of Kings fans and all fans across the league in the same scenario. But the issue for me is we can debate for hours and hours whether the Kings should be giving up Keon Ellis, and I've seen a lot of debate among Kings fans on whether they should be giving up Keon Ellis in a Jonathan Kuminga trade, and I'm sure Warrior fans would have countless hours of debate as well on whether Keon Ellis is, a good enough return for Jonathan Kuminga in a sign and trade. Personally, if you just said, like, if you took everything else out of it and just said, would you trade Jonathan Kuminga for Keon Ellis, I'd probably say, given the scenario that we're in right now, yes, maybe, because this has been dragging on so long and because of the context of it. It seems like JK doesn't necessarily want to be at the Warriors, obviously. So Keon Ellis, I think, would be a fine return. I'm not hugely into him, but I can certainly see the value in a guy that, has developed over his 3-year career into one of the best perimeter defenders in the league, has shot 42.9% from three-point range across his 3-year career, including, I think, 43.3% or nearly 4 attempts per game last season. So that's the kind of 3-and-D guy the Warriors could really do with, particularly alongside Steph. The only issue I kind of have with it is that the Warriors are trying to get that kind of player anyway in DeAnthony Melton in free agency. And yes, like, I suppose you could point at Ellis and say, well, he's not coming off a torn ACL. He doesn't have the injury concern as Melton. And yes, you could also just have both on the roster. I think they're both quality enough players, two-way players, to be able to have both of them and both play heavy minutes. But then you again put that within an environment that also has Brandon Podziemski, who's probably going to be playing 25 plus minutes. Like, I heard Monty Poole kind of say the other day that he wants Pods back in like a 15 to 20 minute per game role. And I was like, this dude averaged like 30 minutes in the playoffs. He's going into his third year. Like, do we really think he's going to be taking that much of a step back? Now, perhaps there's at times an over-reliance on Pods, but I think that's an over-reliance in actual on-court role rather than the minutes he's playing, in terms of, I think he fits perfectly with Steph and Jimmy and is like a third, fourth, or fifth starter kind of thing. But as soon as you try and put the ball in his hands at this point of his career to be a creator more so, that's where he gets into problems. So he can still play 30 plus minutes so long as like Steph and Jimmy are also on the floor kind of at the same time, and he can play a more supplementary role to those guys. So you got Pods, if you bring in Melton, if you bring in if you've got Buddy Hield on the roster, obviously, whose shooting is going to be important, albeit I could see him taking a step back in his minutes. You've got mutual interest in Seth Curry, which I'm assuming if you got Keon Ellis in a Kuminga trade, that interest would probably dissipate from the Warriors side. As much as Steph may hate that, I just don't think there'd be any need for Seth Curry in that situation. So there's just a bunch of two guards, and I don't know where all the minutes would go around aside from Steve having to play 3 or 4 guard lineups, which I know Warrior fans won't be happy with. So to me, like, the value I have in Keon Ellis is, I think, diluted and lowered somewhat by the fact the Warriors are probably getting Melton anyway on a veteran minimum contract in free agency, because, again, yes, there's a bit more injury risk there, but I think Melton might actually be better than Ellis if he gets up and going. And it's not like he's old. He's like 2 years older than Keon Ellis. So again, yes, there's injury risk, but I'm not as high on Ellis as potentially other teams would be, because I know that Melton is likely coming in for agency, and you've got Pods already who's going to be playing 25, 30 minutes at least as well. You'd imagine you could slide Jimmy to the 2 in some lineups, particularly if Horford's coming in. You could slide Moody to the 2. Like, there's just so many different options for the Warriors that, frankly, any shooting guard option from anywhere around the league, I think, is probably, unless they're an absolute superstar player, like, I'm not sure I have, even my interest in, and he's not a shooting guard, he's more of a combo, maybe more of a point guard, but like Kobe White, to me, my interest in him has lowered. I'd still be, I think, okay if, there was a sign and trade there with Chicago that got Kobe White for JK. I think that'd still be fine. But it doesn't thrill me as much as what it once did, because, again, this glut of guards that not only do the Warriors have right now, but they're also available in free agency. So anyway, we can talk for hours on Keon Ellis, and you can let me know in the comments whether you think that's a fine return for the Warriors or not. But the issue is, and the debates that I see on social media is, there's very few arguments where I see an actual framework of a trade in place. And this is the thing, is like, okay, would you trade Keon Ellis for Jonathan Kuminga? Well, if you say yes or no, it doesn't really matter, because if you say yes, like, there's still other parts of the trade that would need to be figured out, because Keon Ellis makes $2.3 million. And this is where, again, the base year compensation stuff gets really, really complicated, because you've got a scenario where any sign and trade that happens, you are automatically hard capped at the first apron, right? The Kings are already hard capped at the first apron because they made the Dennis Schroeder sign and trade. So they are already at that point. The Warriors aren't. But again, if they send Kuminga out in a sign and trade, they will be. And so, again, with the base year compensation rules, only 50% of Kuminga's salary counting for the Warriors that they can take back in. Again, if you hard cap the first apron, you can take back an extra $7.5 million. So in all the kind of scenarios I've laid out, I've kind of suggested that Kuminga's on like a $20 million per year contract, and that's simply based on what I think is probably about right at this point and the lack of market for him. And also, we had Fred Katz of The Athletic do a poll of 16 league executives a couple of days ago, and they basically their mean average on that poll was $20.4 million. And I think 10 of the 16 league executives said that Kuminga should be getting a 3-year contract, which to me is like 3 years, 60, something around there, which I'd be fine with the Warriors re-signing him at that number. And I'm just not sure Sacramento are going to go much further than that as well, because if we look at, again, like what they've got to trade here just to make the financials work, it's pretty complicated. So what you're looking at is if Kuminga's on $20 million, right, then that's half the Warriors can take back is 10 plus 7.5. That's $17.5 million, right? And let's assume that the Warriors aren't going to want to include Moses Moody, Buddy Hield, or some kind of other smaller contract. Let's simplify this so it's just Kuminga. Now, yes, you could add other salaries, but that's like going to get really, really complicated. And I'm not sure, like, are the Warriors going to want to give up like Kuminga and Moody and something else potentially to reach like DeMar DeRozan's salary? I don't think so. Like, and so if we look at the guys that are making, well, let's just look at the guys that are making between $10 and $20 million for the Kings. It's essentially Keegan Murray, it's Dennis Schroeder, who cannot be traded because he literally just signed, and it's Malik Monk. Now, the Warriors have already kind of put their nose up at Malik Monk and that opportunity. I think he's making $18.4 million next season. Again, that would require the Kings to give Kuminga just over $20 million for that to be actually viable in that scenario. Obviously, there was the sign and trade scenario previously where, you know, Monk was going to the Pistons and Schroeder was coming into the Kings, and then obviously the Saric Carter and 2 seconds. So the Monk thing, the Warriors don't really have interest in, and I'll circle back round to that in a second. The Schroeder thing obviously can't happen. The Warriors wouldn't want it to happen for starters, and secondly, it can't be traded. Third, would you do, like, if the Warriors' dream would be like, and again, I don't want Kings fans to get really, really angry with me when I mention the name of Keegan Murray. I'm allowed to mention the name Keegan Murray. I'm allowed to do it. I shouldn't be put in jail for it. I shouldn't be yelled at for it. Let me say, Keegan Murray is the dream trade target for the Warriors and Warrior fans. The dream. It's also an unrealistic dream at this point, okay? So when I write about it, and I've got Kings fans coming back on me at social media saying, how dare you even mention Keegan Murray? It's like, did you read the paragraph? I said that's the dream for the Warriors. I didn't say it was realistic. I didn't say the Kings were going to trade Keegan Murray. And so I'm allowed to mention his name. I'm saying it's the dream for the Warriors. Not that it's realistic, but if you're the Warriors, you would at least ask, okay, how many picks would it take on top of Jonathan Kuminga to get Keegan Murray and perhaps take Dario Saric's contract back in the meantime, if that means you have to give a pick less or something like that? Because again, financially, that would work, right? The interesting thing to me here, which I really struggled to make sense of when the reports first came out, was the Saric Carter in 2 seconds, right? And obviously, from a value perspective, we just didn't think that was anywhere near enough from a Warrior perspective, and Golden State quickly shut that down, which is good. That's what they wanted. Now, there has been this idea of, oh, well, how about Saric Carter and a protected first? Well, for start, and like Kings fans again on social media are kind of saying, oh, well, they've upped their offer. This is a stronger offer. Warriors should consider this. And it's like, well, hang on, a protected first, depending on what the other side of that is, could actually be worse than 2 seconds, because oftentimes you had these trades where it's a lottery protected first, but then if it doesn't convey, it conveys into a second round pick. It's like, well, 1 second round pick is worse than 2 second round picks. So really, like, at the end of the day, is that actually better? If it was a lottery protected pick and if it didn't convey then, and it conveyed to an unprotected pick the next year, sure, yeah, that's a better offer, right? And the Warriors may potentially consider that. I'm just checking my watch again with these notifications coming through, but nothing on social media. We've been waiting 27, 28 days here for this Kuminga thing to to happen and for Shams to report something concrete in regard to the Warriors, and we haven't got it yet. So I'm getting quite frustrated, as you guys can imagine. But the issue with the Saric and Carter, and again taking picks completely out of the window for the second, and just looking at the finances of it, Saric and Carter make a combined salary that, again, for this to work from a Sacramento perspective and for them to be able to stay under the first apron, which they're hard capped at, Kuminga would have to make a starting salary per year at less than $17.85 million next season. Does Jonathan Kuminga want to take less than $18 million on this contract? Like, and you could, I suppose, as a Kings fan, you could argue, well, maybe he does just to get out of the Warriors and just to get into a situation where he can really spread his wings and try and develop into a star and be given real starting opportunity. And maybe it's I don't know, like a 3-year, $51 million contract or something, which to me just sounds pretty disgusting for JK. But maybe he takes that and thinks, well, now I've got 3 years, maybe the third year's a player option, and I can, because that's the other thing, sign and trades, like the contract has to be a minimum of 3 years as well. So that's the other thing you got to consider as part of this as well. So, and I think it might be 3 years guaranteed money, so you couldn't even get a player option. So is it like 3 years 51 or 3 years, between 3 years 50 and 55? Does Jonathan Kuminga want to accept that? I don't think so. Like, that's not really attractive. I think the Warriors would be offering him more than that simply to re-sign with them. And that's going to be the interesting balance to me, is like, there's a good chance here, I think, that the Kings will actually offer less than what the Warriors will. Because, again, they're hard capped at the first apron, and the Warriors can bring back Kuminga and get the DeAnthony Melton, our Horford signings done and go over the first apron. And obviously, if they're using their non-taxpayer mid-level, they have to be hard capped at the second apron. But it gives them a little bit more wiggle room than what the Kings actually do with their finances, kind of thing. So I'll be interested to see what the offer is from the, because this is the thing, like, we've never actually got any reports of what the Warriors are offering, only reports from Slater the other day saying that they believe their offer is the best starting salary offer on the table for Kuminga currently. And again, we've got like no idea here of what the Kings are offering financially from a contract perspective. And again, I'm going to be interested to see in Kuminga's head, like, and his agency, like, how much less are you willing to take to go to Sacramento compared to if you're actually getting more money from the Warriors? Like, how much do you really, really value that potential opportunity to go and get a starting role and play 30 plus minutes guaranteed a game and be on a team that most expect is probably going to be out of the playoff picture next season, you'd imagine, and are probably going to make moves to try and get worse in the short term in terms of potentially trading DeMar DeRozan, Levine if they could, these kind of things. So that's going to be an interesting balance to me on how much Kuminga is willing to sacrifice. Because again, if it's Dario Saric and it's Devin Carter, then the absolute max that the Kings can offer here without getting a third team involved, with it just being Saric and Carter going to the Warriors for Jonathan Kuminga, like that, the absolute max they can offer Kuminga in that scenario is a deal starting at less than $17.85 million next season, which to me is too low. Like, I don't see Kuminga accepting that. So then we've got to like push on to, okay, well, could you throw Ellis into it, right? Could it be Saric, Carter, and Keon Ellis for Kuminga? And then to me, that's like, well, that kind of makes some sense. Like, I think the Warriors, again, would be maybe okay with a Keon Ellis for Kuminga swap. The Kings, when it comes down to it, who knows? Again, this has been debated significantly. If the Kings really, really want Kuminga, maybe they put Keon Ellis on the table. The Ellis scenario to this is so complicated because of the fact that they obviously picked up his team option for $2.3 million, and he's going to be an unrestricted free agent next season. And the last thing I think the Warriors want to do is trade for 1 year of Keon Ellis. If you're getting Keon Ellis in the trade, you see him as a valuable part to your future and you want to try and lock him down in the long term. So the Warriors would want to be pretty confident in their ability to re-sign Keon Ellis if they do trade him, if they do get him back in a Kuminga trade. The issue with that is that it's probably going to take 15 to 20 million at least per season for you to be able to do that. And then again, if you don't, right, if you can't get him on a new deal, then Like, there's no leverage here in terms of the restricted free agency of Kuminga. Ellis will be unrestricted. He can just leave next offseason. And so, again, the Warriors don't want to put themselves in a situation where it's like, we traded Jonathan Kuminga, who we still see as a pretty, valuable asset, and we got 1 year of Keon Ellis out of it. That's not ideal. But then again, what are we willing to go to in terms of the finances of this on a new Keon Ellis deal? Like, this is the thing where we can look at the potential trades right now, but with this new landscape in terms of the first and second tax apron, everything has to be looked through a prism of the next thing down the line. So if you trade for Keon Ellis right now, what's the deal for him next? What's the extension number look like? Right? How does that figure in to if Keon Ellis is going to want $15 to $20 million, what happens with DeAnthony Melton? If he comes back, has a bounce back season, right, plays really well, he's probably going to want a similar number as well. Brandon Pajemski is going to be extension eligible next offseason at the same time as well. Like, that's 3 shooting guards. Which one are you going to pay? Maybe you kind of feel better about, we'll just see which one the best is. But again, if Keon Ellis isn't part of that, and you've just given up Kuminga for one average year of Keon Ellis, what's the point? Right? So these things have all got to be looked through a prism of not just the now, not just next season, but the year after and potentially the year after that. Like, and we know the Warriors are trying to look through that kind of sphere, because otherwise they probably would have given up the multiple first round picks in potential trades to really upgrade the roster in the short term. So I don't know. The Keon Ellis thing to me is super complicated, but I suppose if you looked at, again, just in the short term, does Saric, Carter, and Keon Ellis for Kuminga work? Well, financially, it probably does. The Warriors, again, might actually come to the conclusion that, yes, we're happy with Keon Ellis for Jonathan Kuminga, and the Kings might come to the conclusion that we got to give up something to get something. So we'll relinquish Keon Ellis in this deal, right? And the Warriors get another lottery protected. Sorry, not the Warriors get another recent lottery pick in Devin Carter. So I suppose that deal could theoretically work. The issue then is, like, the Warriors bring in 3 players for one that have 12 players on the roster. Are they happy just signing Horford and Melton after that and having, like, their 9 players they've got currently plus Horford, Melton, Ellis, Carter, and Saric? I don't know. Like, and that's the thing. Once you bring in 3 guys for one and it limits your roster spots, like, Saric is basically a 0. Like, he's worse than 0 in terms of value, but if you're the Warriors, you're not going into next season expecting him to be a rotation piece for you. And then Carter and Ellis, as good as Ellis might be and as talented as Carter might be as a recent lottery pick, like, they're 2 guards again. 2 guards to add to Steph Curry, Brandon Pajemski, Buddy Hield. You bring in DeAnthony Melton. You've shown mutual interest in Seth Curry. There's Will Richard on a 2-way contract who could try and push for rotation minutes. Like, it's just a glut of guards there. And again, I'm not sure why that's going to necessarily interest the Warriors too much. So this is why, like, I've laid out all these scenarios here in terms of Monk, Keegan Murray. Obviously, the Kings, that's just obviously not going to happen. Thanks, Kings fans. Combinations of Saric, Carter, and Ellis. Like, DeRozan, I heard the reports that, like, the Kings would have a handshake agreement that if Kuminga comes in, DeRozan would be heading out the other way. The only thing I could see, it's got to be some kind of multi-team trade. And this is, again, it gets super complicated when you bring in a third team, you're trying to appease that third team, is there a 3-team trade that could materialize where Monk or DeRozan goes somewhere, Kuminga goes to the Kings, and the Warriors get something from that team that Monk or DeRozan go to? Like, I don't know. Like, these things, it's just, to me, it's like, it's way too complicated to understand right now, honestly. And if the Warriors could swap Kuminga for DeRozan right now, would they? I hate that spacing with DeMar DeRozan, but maybe they just think that's a talented bucket getter that they could do with potentially. So maybe they would. But again, DeRozan's salary is too high. Even Monk's salary is too high, depending on what kind of contract. Again, if the Kings were to push up to like $22 million a year for Kuminga, then the Warriors could get to Monk, but then they've shown no interest in doing that at this point. I think the thing with Monk is that more so he's got 3 years left on his contract, and the Warriors don't necessarily want to push past a contract that is, again, beyond the next 2 years of this cycle with Steph, Jimmy, and Draymond. Again, I think their only contracts beyond that point are Moses Moody, who's on a pretty mid-tier salary, and Buddy Hield, we got to remember, is making $9.2 million next season. Then his third year is only $3 million guaranteed. So, and then the fourth year is a player option. So it's like Buddy Hield this year is almost like an expiring contract, which, again, getting off topic, could be interesting in a potential trade, maybe. But again, that's getting off topic. I don't know. I'm just looking. Let me know, guys. Let me know if you're a Kings fan watching this. I don't want to argue. I don't want to argue with you about what the value is. I just want to hear your trade proposals. I want to hear what the trade is, and therefore what Kuminga is getting on his contract as part of it. Because if it's Dario Saric and Devin Carter, then you're accepting that Jonathan Kuminga will have to accept a contract at less than $17.85 million starting salary next season. That's what you're telling me. So, don't know. I don't see it. I don't see what the trade is. And that's why it's so difficult to see that even if Kuminga wants to go to the Kings and the Kings want him, I just don't see how the finances work it out. I would just have a situation where keep it in the back pocket. Re-sign, if I'm the Warriors, just continue trying to re-sign Kuminga. And then obviously if come January, February, things aren't working out and the Kings are still interested, then you might have more avenues to saying, okay, well, we can trade for DeMar DeRozan or something like that and take him off the Kings' hands and do a straight swap there or something along those lines. I don't know, but I just right now, given the basic compensation rules, given sign and trades hard cap both teams at the first apron, it's difficult. It is really, really difficult to see. And again, you got to look through look through a sphere of what this would mean for future moves down the track. Because again, if the Warriors bring in Keon Ellis and suddenly have Ellis and Melton on expiring contracts and Podziemski, who's going to be extension eligible, how does that work? If you're the Kings, like look at it from the Kings situation. If you're bringing Kuminga and retaining Keon Ellis and Keegan Murray, great work, fantastic. How are you signing Kuminga to, as we assume, like a $20 million per year contract or something around there? You're going to be paying Murray at least 20 to 25. You're going to be paying, I would say Keegan Murray might want even more than that. You're going to be paying Ellis $15 to $20 million a year at least. Like, how are you bringing in Kuminga while also re-signing Ellis and Murray? That's another question. Like, you have to obviously try and get off DeRozan for expiring salary, I'd imagine. Maybe you can do that. Would you're obviously going to try and get off Levine. I think that's going to be way more difficult than what we probably understand in reality. So, there's a lot of moving parts here, and I think there's probably too many moving parts and too many constraints that still, to me, makes a sign and trade difficult. But maybe that's just me being an optimistic Warrior fan, still hoping that, hey, I'd probably prefer JK to come back at this stage. Again, I'm not going to be mad if we get Keon Ellis. I think that's okay. But again, what does that mean for Anthony Melton? What does it mean for Brandon Podziemski and his extension eligibility next offseason? I'm going to finish it up there, guys. Again, Warriors fans, Kings fans, throw me in the YouTube comments what you think a trade could look like. Make sure it actually works from a financial perspective. Because again, I don't see much going on here unless it's like a 3-team trade. And then even then, it's difficult to get an understanding of what that would look like right now because there's been no reports or rumors of anything. And there's 28 other teams in the league who would have interest in Malik Monk. I'm sure some teams would. Are they going to be willing to give up something that the Warriors would then like in return for Kuminga? I don't know. If you've got some 3-team hypotheticals, I'd love to hear them. Honestly, genuinely love to hear them. So please let me know. Thanks to those of you that are watching on YouTube or if you're listening via your podcast feed. Much appreciated for the ongoing support. As I said at the start of the episode, I'm going to be off in about 20 hours time right now. So 20 hours time, I'll be flying across the world, around UK, Europe, that kind of thing. So thoroughly looking forward to it. In the meantime, I'll still try and get reactive pieces and stuff up for BlueManHoop.com. There'll be a few colleagues of mine looking after the site during that period as well. So we're going to be continuing to pump out content. And again, I'll try and jump on my laptop to do a couple of short episodes once the Kuminga things goes down, and then the subsequent moves that we expect for Horford and Melton as well. Thanks again, guys. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel already, that would be greatly appreciated. You can follow me at POK252. That's POK252 on X/Twitter. And if you're in America, it's Sunday night. Have a great rest of your weekend.